took my vote away. Well, he greased the palms that took the Bill of Rights away. And I remember the freedom for which we fought and paid. And well, it's time to reclaim time, to reclaim time, to reclaim democracy. Oh.
Hi, welcome to Reclaiming Democracy. I am Jackie Brown Miller. On today's show, we will attempt to connect the dots between the flaws in our voting system, which are anti-democratic in nature, and corporate power over our government. Today, we will be interviewing Kathleen Wynn of blackboxvoting.org. Welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you.
Kathleen, what is blackboxvoting.org?
Well, we are a 501c3 organization, nonprofit, nonpartisan, and we consider our goal is to be consumer protection for elections.
Consumer protection for elections. So is this about the integrity of our voting system, the heart of our democracy?
Absolutely. That's our main mission, is to investigate and expose any potential for fraud or problems within the voting system that is systemic and it is undermining the votes.
Okay, well, let's talk about the integrity of our voting system and the changes that were made recently to that system in the way of electronic voting machines. How has that, in your opinion, harmed the integrity of our democracy?
Well, what we've discovered since black box voting goes out into the field and investigates these things, one-on-one, so that we're not just, dealing with the internet and research alone to get our information. And what we've discovered in our field trips, so to speak, is that the voting machines are secret, that they count our votes in secrecy, and there's no citizen oversight. Citizens really can't participate because we've privatized our voting, and it's left totally up to the vendors to administer our elections.
Why is it secret? How does it work, and who makes it secret?
Well, the source code, the code that in which these machines count the votes, is considered proprietary. It's a trade secret. So by law, our own laws, we have just pushed the American people right out of the process and put it totally in the hands of vendors who manufacture these machines. And we're totally dependent on them to tell us how to run the election because these systems are proprietary.
So are you saying that we've gone from a system where we had sworn elected officials who are managing an open process to a system where private corporations are managing our votes in a secret process?
Pretty much. I mean, election officials are still part of it, but unfortunately what we've discovered is they become dependent on the vendors totally, just to almost to the total degree of running an election, because these systems are complicated, people aren't properly trained, and to the extent that they still are not allowed to understand how the software works. So they, in the case of ES&S, which is one of the voting machine vendors, they totally control the election, run the election. They have their own person in there running it. It is not done by the election officials or anyone in the election office.
Okay. What about the paper trail? I mean, it seems like when I was growing up, everything was done on paper, and now a lot of our voting is done with machines that are essentially ATM machine technology turned into voting machine. And when I go to the bank to get money out, I get a piece of paper. Right. And I've heard a little bit about this issue of a paper trail, and that the paper trail could sort of fix some of the problems with electronic voting and the secrecy aspect by creating a paper document of our votes that can be recounted later. Will you talk about the paper trail, and some of the companies have said we can't do it or we won't, and even if they did, would that fix the problem?
Well, when we first started out on this, learning about this issue and investigating how these systems ran since they were pushed upon us pretty quickly, and the American people were not even part of the dialogue or the interaction with these companies to say, yes, we want them in the first place. Suddenly one day, boom, there they are. And then they passed the HAVA Act, which meant, if you want, we'll give you $3.9 billion available to the American election officials to choose any one of these X amount of machine, at your, when you want to get that money in your hand. So things happen at such breakneck speed that at the time we thought, okay, the way to deal with these machines so we have some accountability and checks and balances in place is to have a paper trail. But we've discovered that's not good enough. In fact, even a paper ballot isn't necessarily the answer either, because recently, and I'll get more into that later, the black box voting discovered that they can, the way these software has been programmed and designed, it sacrificed security for flexibility, in that we learned that through the memory card, they have an executable program where you can go in, a hacker, someone who understands how these computers work, can go in and change the program to manipulate the audit log and the poll tapes, which is what we have available to us to compare against the paper trail. So unfortunately, with that realization that you can manipulate the audit capability, then the chances of the election officials are restricted in many cases to count the paper ballots by hand, so that it almost makes it, it destroys the democracy in that particular state based on that type of restriction, which unfortunately is growing in greater numbers throughout the country. They will not, the chances of counting a paper ballot are remote at best.
Well, why is that? Are you saying it's because there wouldn't be anything to ever alert us that there's a problem and there's a need to go and recount the paper?
If you don't have the machine alert you that something is not adding up, if all the numbers can be manipulated on the audit logs and the poll tapes to look like everything is copacetic, everything's fine, you would never even call for a hand-counted paper ballot in a recount. And even in those cases in Florida, they're actually making it against the law to have a recount, which is mind-boggling when you think about it. Why? And then here in Washington State, Secretary of State Sam Reed is stating that any election supervisor who wants to spot check and compare the paper ballots against these poll tapes and audit logs is conducting an unauthorized recount. So they're going to not be allowed to do that. So why are we being restricted and our hands tied to be able to make certain we can, if we're going to use these machines, if they want us to actually put them, trust in them, give us checks and balances that make sense. So as it stands now, we're actually getting rid of everything that would give us confidence in the outcome being an accurate one.
So you were telling me earlier that your organization had gone down to Tallahassee, Florida, and you managed to succeed into hacking into an electronic voting system in a way where you demonstrated to the local election officials that you could have hacked in and changed the outcome of the vote without them ever knowing it. Why don't you tell us about that?
Correct. This was just last week we did this. We were always suspicious that we hadn't had a chance to really look inside these systems to really understand how they work. So how the heck can we come up with a solution that would be, rational or reasonable? And so we were lucky enough and blessed to find this wonderful election official, Ian Sancho of Tallahassee, Florida, in Leon County, who allowed us, because he has gone out of his way to make certain that his system is as secure as he could possibly make it. However, what we discovered, there's no way he could have possibly done anything about it, and I don't think he even knew it existed, because he was told by the vendors this couldn't happen. And so they were also certified and allowed to go out through 800 districts throughout the country. So we're questioning why that could happen, because we were able, with a special consultant from Finland to come in, who really understood that he felt that the memory card, which is a little ballot box inside the Diebold optical scan machine, which about 35% of the country voted on, and now they're really pushing it big time now. And within that little memory card is that executable program, which he says he can't believe that they would put it there because you can take it out and put it in. It doesn't stay with the system. And he was able on 3 different ways to just replace the real memory card with a, manipulated one. And there was no alarm or error message that came up saying this is not the original one. Mm-hmm. Second time, he made the program shorter than the original program of the original memory card, and that showed that it couldn't tell if any bytes were affected, like something changed in the way the program was originally set up. So it gave no, whistles and, alarms there either. The third time, he actually manipulated the number of votes so that they would add up, but they were changed from what they were originally, and yet he set it up so that the poll tapes would match the central tabulator audit log, and that, therefore, you would think all of the votes added up correctly, so there would be no need for a recount or to check the ballot itself to count it to see if it was correct, because there would be nothing there to indicate anything was wrong.
So according to your organization then, right now we have an electronic voting system where voting, again, is the heart of our democracy, that is done inside of the machine in secret, inside the black box that we as citizens can't see.
Correct.
It's hackable, and there's no paper trail.
Well, there is a paper trail, but it's one that we can't trust because it's not only that you're manipulating the central tabulator now, which we did early in an earlier test. We now have hacked into the memory card, which now we can control both the central tabulator and the memory card, which puts the data, the votes, into the poll tapes, which is that receipt you get at the end of the day that tells you how many, the various races and the votes that were in each race. Mm-hmm. And now you can't trust that those numbers are correct. So we've totally taken everything out of the scenario except the paper ballot.
So let's discuss why we bought into this computerized vote counting machine
Good
idea. Why did our election officials get persuaded that this was the way to go? Well,
there's so many different reasons, I suspect. Off the top of my head, what I think is that it was convenience and considered efficient, and we were assured by the testing that's done at the Wiley Labs and Cyber Lab that they, would make it to the state level to be certified, that all of the proper, steps were taken to make sure these machines were trustworthy. And having no background in it, most of America just had to trust these, quote, experts to do their jobs.
Were these corporate lobbyists,
well,
large corporations like
lobbyists.
Diebold who want to profit from the vote counting industry?
Let's just say what we've discovered is not just lobbyists, it's now interchangeable parts. We have tinker toys, as we call them, because they all fit in, and they're all in this exclusive club where a vendor can go out to become a lobbyist, or a state representative decides that he's going to leave that office and go become and work for the vendor, or he can become a lobbyist. They all interchange parts so that there's so much conflict of interest, and so that there's influence peddling, if you will, where they use their influence in any capacity, whether they as a state rep who's now lobbying for this vendor that they used to, now they're going to help convince their, colleagues that they should buy this system. They're totally dependent on this group of people that just revolves in a revolving door and becomes an exclusive club where the people, there's no citizen oversight, or they don't disclose how much they spend and what they spend it on and who's paying them. We actually were in Chicago recently and interviewed one of the pillars of the Hispanic community there. No one in a million years would have expected this man, who really, in all, if you were to look at him at face value, he would ever want to lobby for a voting machine vendor, but he was at the tune of $20,000 a month for over a year. That's pretty good money to be able to influence people, and he did call it persuading people to buy this particular machine.
I see. So where's the media in all of this? Are they sort of engaging in a pep rally, saying this is good, fun, easy, let's all vote with electronic machines, or are they really examining whether the machines are accurate, tamper-proof, free of criminal or special interests?
I think part of the problem is this is not a soundbite kind of an issue. It isn't quick and easy to do. You have to do an investigation into it, and I don't think our media does that as much anymore as they used to do, particularly, you know, television. I mean, it's sound bites, and I think corporate America controls a lot of that, unfortunately, as to what gets out there to the public. And newspapers, you know, they don't spend as much money on their reporters to do investigative journalism. So this is not a quick, easy, black and white issue. So therefore, it really is incumbent upon the American people and groups like ours and other activists who are in this, who are worried about this issue, to step up to the plate, because I don't want to judge them harshly other than they haven't been doing their job, and I'm not going to wait on them or ask them to do it. I'll keep hoping they will eventually pick this up and run with us. But until then, I think we should, groups like this, your organization, Reclaim Democracy, and the American people themselves have to become the media.
But this is really, to me, it seems like a very important issue, in part because, yeah, we've always had people trying to fix elections, face it, and we always will. But it kind of seems like if somebody can hack into every single machine in the country and do what you were successful in doing in Tallahassee, Florida, that we could have a national election stolen or rigged by just a handful of computer-type people, and who knows who's behind them asking them to do the hacking.
Right.
And that really destroys the legitimacy or the mandate of any nationally elected official. What do you think about that?
I do believe it's an important story, no doubt. I think that this is a very hot issue. You got to be very careful how you approach it, because if this is true, which at the level that we have now, we have proven that it's true on that level. I'm sure if we take it to the other levels and the other vendors, we'll find similar vulnerabilities. And if we keep uncovering this sort of thing, it will be devastating to our country to try to go at it point blank. Okay, everyone, you know, that may have benefited from this system that might have been manipulated, causing to question your election. I don't think we can approach it from that standpoint, and I think that's the fear that a lot of the media has, is how do you approach this without causing a huge uproar in this country that could rip the fabric of this country. And we don't want to do that either. What we want to do, and what we've talked about as possible solutions, is amnesty. Let's start over. Let's everybody out of the pool. Let's recognize that there is a major problem here. Let's stop pretending it doesn't exist because it might be difficult. And let's just say, okay, we'll just give amnesty to the past, and let's just start over and move toward the future with a whole new clean slate. And we've suggested other ways right now to handle that with color-coded ballots, because there are many races and it can get complicated. So we simply said, why not color-code them? White for federal, green for a state, and light blue for the judges and other issues that are on the ballot, so that when you bring in a team of counters, you know, that are not the poll workers, and they come and you can easily separate those races by color coding them, and then you count those different piles for those different elections,
so
and do the federal first.
Is this going back to paper?
Go back to the paper ballot, because we can't put a Band-Aid on a gaping wound, and what we're discovering is the wound, we think, is going to get bigger, not smaller, as we get further into this. And if this is possible, what we did in Tallahassee in hacking 3 different ways into this system that has programs in it that are just not security conscious, then we must suspect that the others at least need to be tested as well before we go forward. So in the meanwhile, back at the ranch, let's go back to what we know, and we count the ballots at the precinct level. The biggest issue of attack point that they have is you can rig that as well. Only that this is a talking point, and it's needs to be addressed that the issue with paper ballots is the chain of custody from the polling place to the headquarters. If we can count it at the polling place, we've already taken away that capability to manipulate it.
Well, there are lots of things that government has traditionally done. services that government has performed that are being outsourced to private companies, like prisons, for example.
Right.
And do you think this is sort of like the outsourcing of our democracy, or the outsourcing of our voting, by allowing these voting machine companies to take over our system in this way?
Well, it certainly seems that way. I mean, the people aren't even really involved. It's gotten to the point where you just show up and punch, hit that, and you disappear because there's nothing more you're involved in. And I just think that the minute we privatized our voting system, that's when trouble began, because it's in the hands of a few. We totally have to have a faith-based voting kind of approach to the very thing that is the heart of our democracy. And when the people don't consider that worthy of their time, the few times that we really do have it, I think we're really in trouble.
What is the connection, if any, in your mind between campaign finance reform, or the need for it, and the fact that we have this black box voting system?
Well, I do believe that the two go hand in hand. I mean, wherever there's money that influences decisions made by our legislators, the same thing is happening simultaneously with the decision on procurement of these voting machines by the same people. So there's this what I call it is a money laundering machine in our election system, that the more you can control the election process, those that are in power will continue to make money. And that's how they can do it. And it's a petri dish for corruption. And we've got to face that. When you have that kind of unaccountability, with that millions, and in some cases billions of dollars going all over, changing hands all over the place, you can't imagine that people should be not overseeing, but, there shouldn't be someone there, some oversight involved. And to what we've seen thus far, there is none. There really isn't.
So I guess one example I think of where campaign finance reform is necessary to get rid of corruption in government would be, let's say, the logging industry. Maybe wants governmental policies to allow the chopping down of more trees, and so they're going to provide millions of dollars to candidate X, so that candidate X allows governmental policies to cut down more trees. Is it kind of the same thing here, where we have these big corporate voting companies, and they want access so that they control things and can make a lot of money, and we can't really seem to get our governmental officials to change things because they're on the corporate dole?
Well, if you think about it, if you can, the people that you want in power to make those decisions to favor these corporations, where do you get? Corruption on a national level can never happen unless it's on a local level. As Tip O'Neill said, all politics is local. So what you do is you control our election process, which is on the local level everywhere. And if you can control who gets into office by having a system that can be manipulated, even if it hasn't been, but although there is great circumstantial evidence that it has been, for example, in Volusia County, where they're missing a third of their voting records, and they have the same system that we were able to hack into. So when you can connect that, if on a local level you control who gets in there to make those decisions on the voting system, and then those people move up the ladder and get on up to the representative and Senate level and on, there's no doubt in my mind the two go hand in hand, because in both cases money gets influenced to get the machine in place that will hopefully get the person in position to make the decisions that decide what trees get chopped down, or whether they don't, or whether we have health, what kind of health care plans we have, or pension plans, or any system that has to be voted on. This all is connected.
But of course, campaign finance reform, that's an interesting issue, because money has been declared by the Supreme Court to be a form of free speech, which is an exercise of the First Amendment. And as you know, corporations have said that they have the right to corporate political free speech. And
depends. And doesn't it have to first consider that if it's in the best interest of the people it represents? I mean, money in and of itself isn't what runs this country.
Well, I'm just saying it'll be interesting to see if we can have effective campaign finance reform with corporate personhood in existence?
Well, I think if we can clean up our voting system, if we can really put it back into the hands of the people, that the balance is there, no matter what party or what your political, views are. Mm-hmm. The balance almost always is going to be there, just much in the same way that we always put our citizens on juries rather than the experts or the lawyers, because the citizens ultimately are the important ingredient to our governing. And if we take them out of the process, then what it becomes is one big corporation. Mm-hmm. And I don't think the people want that.
Let's talk about the right to vote. In the 2000 election, the Supreme Court made a statement when they were ruling in the Gore versus Bush case that there is no constitutional right to vote. And that was interesting to me, because if I were to go to an electronic voting machine and hit, candidate A, and the X jumped over to candidate B, I would feel disenfranchised, as if I'd lost my right to vote. How do you feel about black box voting and its effect on people's quote-unquote right or lack of right to vote?
Well, I hope what we can do is educate the public as to what is involved in your voting process. I think there is a misunderstanding that it's just there, that it's being taken care of, and that we put all our trust in a very few number of people, and we haven't been paying attention. We've been asleep at the wheel, so to speak. And I think what we're trying to do is point out to them that every state, I think our problem is a lot of the states all have different laws. And Jesse Jackson Jr. suggested that we have put in our Constitution amendment that we have the right to vote as citizens. Mm-hmm. I think Americans take that for granted. We just assume it. And what we're finding out is, to the contrary, that that without the right to vote, with not only cast the vote, it's how it's counted. Mm-hmm. If we cannot be certain that we do everything possible to keep it non-secret, citizen oversight and participation, it's an exercise in futility, and we have a perception of democracy. We're not actually living in, well, we call it a republic, not a democracy, but it's only a perception. And I think that, to me, I've always thought we had that right, just by inalienable right as an American citizen, that's why we go there.
Right.
Is because I have that right.
But but the Bill of Rights doesn't say right to vote.
I know, but I think it left a little bit open to interpretation that you can't have a country like America and not ensure that that is something for all citizens to have and not be disenfranchised.
Right.
I can't understand. To me, it's a contradiction.
Well, thank you for joining us today. We're out of time. I would just like to say, in wrapping up, you can find more out about Reclaim Democracy and how to support our work by visiting www.reclaimdemocracy.org. Thank you.
Took my vote away. Well, he greased the palms that took the Bill of Rights away. And I remember the freedom for which we fought and paid. And well, it's time to reclaim democracy. Oh, I've never seen a time when my voice was all